Good morning. No, I wasn't here this morning, and I would apologize for that, but I was having too much fun. So I was on the drive from Grants Pass, and I was down there for a wedding, my cousin's wedding, my cousin John. And an interesting thing of why I'm even up here right now is to talk about everybody's favorite topic, which is numbers. Again, not the book, and we're not going to jump into Deuteronomy or anything like that, but we're talking about sort of the things that we track, some of the details, the data that many of you are actually interested in, even if you don't want to sit and listen to somebody talk about them, because you would think numbers would be kind of boring. And you'd probably be right. So we're not going to do it exactly like that. I'm not just going to load up spreadsheets and show you things like, no, we're actually going to talk about numbers and a little bit why they're important, why we track things. And I wanted to sort of just remind us that we are actually all interested in numbers, but sometimes we have too much interest in numbers. Sometimes we get a little bit too focused on like, oh man, if that was like 2 more people, then we'd hit that mark and then we'd feel like we were winning, like we were a success. And that's not really what numbers are for. That's not really what the metrics are for. We have a dashboard. We track these things every week. We track attendance. We track giving. We track all sorts of things, but they're all lag indicators of health. They're all the behind part of health. And so when we're doing things like loving each other well in here, you start to see health grow. You start to see the sick become healthy. You start to see people come closer to Jesus. You start to see discipleship happen. And then you start to see a funny thing with the numbers. They get healthier too. And so we're going to share some numbers today, and I just don't want anybody to get super focused on them because they're not the point. It's good. It solves a curiosity. Like yesterday, my brother and my son asked the same question within 5 minutes of each other. I almost think they talked to each other. How many Jupiters fit inside the sun? And I was like, I don't remember. So I had to look it up because I didn't want to feel stupid. And so it's 1,000, and that's super fascinating to me and my son and not my brother. And I don't know why he asked. So it was probably because my son asked him first. But numbers are interesting, and I don't want us to feel like we don't get to know them or anything like that. They are interesting. I just don't want us to get so focused on a number that we lose the meaning that's behind what caused the number to happen. So the first thing I do want to talk about is everybody's favorite, it's money. So we're going to go into giving. So every week we have basically red boxes set out. Everybody knows how this works. You go to the red box, we don't pass the plate. And there's a pretty good culture around that. If you want to partner with Branches financially, you go through the red box, or you go to the app, or you go to the website, and you can give that way. We really don't push this metric in front of people. We're like, hey, you know what? We would be able to do a better job in kids or whatever it is because if you only just gave more money, if you only just gave more, that's not the point. A giver should be a glad of heart, should be somebody who is giving in response to what Jesus is doing inside their lives. So we track giving, but we don't track it as a way of figuring out, how do we push people to give more? What we do is we see if giving is a sign of healthy discipleship in our members' lives. And people who come through this door, are they actually in a healthy relationship with Jesus? And one indicator of that is giving. So we've got some metrics that we go through. A lot of it is just weekly giving and then annual giving. And so we'll go ahead and throw up some numbers on the screen. What you'll see about this is it's a 32% increase in weekly giving since this year compared to last year. So that means every week we are seeing basically an increase of 32% over the same week last year. That's amazing. That is absolutely incredible. It shows that there's quite a bit of things going on in here because if we're being honest, we're not talking about money enough from the Sunday stage, and people are still doing it, which is pretty amazing. And it's a super encouraging statistic to see that. So we just wanted to share that with you, let you know that we are actually growing in one number. And it's one of our values at Branches is to grow both in number and in relationship. And so this is another lag indicator of that. As part of that, the annual giving is also up. It's a little bit harder to track that because we're still in the year. So I don't have an exact number for that. My apologies. But that's giving, and that is something that we do keep track of. The next thing that we keep track of is our weekly attendance. So when we're talking about bodies in the floor, in the door, that sometimes is the one where we're like, oh man, we're just not figuring it out, right? Like this week was only, 102 people in the building. We must be failing. We must be doing something completely wrong. And we get so stuck and focused on whether or not the friends are actually in the building. What's weird though is that since this year has started, and really since Daniel took over in around November, I have seen, and even before that, I've seen new faces every week. Now, I often am wondering where the same faces I'm used to seeing are, and that's actually probably more of the indicator. But I'm seeing new families, new faces every week. It's pretty amazing to actually see that. So I couldn't memorize all this stuff because I was driving too long. But what we're seeing right now, on average, every week is 329 adults come through here on a Sunday service. At Easter, we had 690 or 630 people in here. I mess up the Easter number all the time. Sometimes it's 800 in my head. Like, there were 1,500 people in here on Easter. If it's a Sunday, like in the morning, and I'm telling you a number, don't believe it. Afternoons, I got them written down. We're good. So Easter was 630 people, which is an increase over last year. And that's just adults. That's just adults that were in this room for 3 services. Even the 7:30, and it was probably the biscuits, wasn't zero. So, which is good, because I didn't want to get up that early, and here we were. So there was definitely a lot of attendance. There was a lot of new families. There's a lot of amazing, just excitement going on in here. And when you see a full building, it actually builds more excitement. So it's not something that we want to focus on. We don't want to say oh man, if we stay at that 300 number, we're going to make it. Guys, that's not what the indicator is. It's about the health of the people showing up in here. If I'm honest, if there were 5 people with giving their lives to Jesus, and those 5 people needed to be poured into by us, we need to pour into those people. Now, I'm super glad that it's 329 and not 5. Don't get me wrong. I love that this lag indicator is showing that there's a lot of health going on. But I just don't want us to get so focused on the fact that 329, is that up? Is that down? It's up from last year. It's about steady with last year. I think we're under 10 is in that number. It's in that error range. So the other thing that's going on is we've had 84 kids every week. It's the average of the week since we started this year. We've had 84 kids spread across 2 services every single week. That's an insane number of children to squeeze into the basement and up there, and they're not spread out evenly. Oh, it's amazing. They're not spread out evenly. Some weeks, they're all in the basement. Like, John has nobody up in grade school because there's just a bunch of toddlers driving Angie crazy in the basement. Other weeks, Angie's like, where are all my children? And John's like, I need help. And so, this is really cool, because what that means, and it's the next stat that we've got, is that we are seeing new families here. What we're seeing is that we've seen 67 new kids this year registered. Now, I don't have that broken out into specifically how many families it's spread across, but this year alone, we've had 67 new children registered. That's at least 30 families show up this year. That's incredible. New families, new faces. When I say every week I'm seeing new faces, it's borne out by the numbers. It's real. We are seeing people invited, coming to Branches, realizing that this is, in fact, a church, a home, a place, a gathering where they can bring their friends to, and their friends are coming. Their friends are here. And we're seeing them stay, because those 84 kids, that's a lot. John, what was last year? Do you remember? No, it was 50, I think. 50, 84 is incredible. At youth, now this is one of my favorites because we don't have numbers from last year, so I'm just going to say only two youth showed up last year, and this year they're doing 54. Yeah, 53, sorry. That's amazing. From 2 to 53, yeah, I'm making up that number. I don't know what last year's was. We don't have data on that because we are now tracking this, but 53 youth on average every single week. I don't know if you guys realize, but when there's 53 teenagers in here, it's like having 329 adults. There's as much noise. There's as much fire for God. They go to small groups, so that's way better than the attendance to small groups of adults. So it's an amazing experience. Obviously, you're not allowed here on a Wednesday night, but just ask Timmy. He'll tell you all about it. It's an incredible thing. He also has restarted the intern program, and he's got 10 interns in that program. And they are serving their hearts out. They are learning skills in the booth. They're learning cafe, greeting. They're learning all sorts of just how to be a church, guys. How to love on others, how to invite people, how to get people engaged, and how to participate in the place that they call home. I mean, that's 10 students whose lives are going to be forever changed. They're going to start to look like people in this room who have given countless hours in their lives and just absolutely love Jesus. And we're already seeing that with 10 students here and 53 students every week getting ready to take those steps past that. This is incredible, guys. I mean, these numbers, they might seem oh man, I thought we were bigger. I thought we were seeing 6,000 people a weekend. I don't know. Where are all those people? Guys, this is amazing. This is amazing to see that we've got 329 adults consistently coming every week. When it feels like it's empty in here, it's not. When it feels like it's full in here, it definitely is. When John is screaming upstairs, it's because he has 80 kids up there and he needs help. So keep that in mind, guys. Next thing I wanted to go through was just something it's not exactly it's not like attendance and giving. It's a little bit more esoteric, but it's called the programs. It's the intensives and the classes and the types of things that we've been doing throughout the year. And so with the programs, what we've been seeing is things like baptisms, Rooted, marriage intensive. We've been tracking small groups, obviously. And so there's a bunch of energy around that. We do have some numbers for those. So with baptisms this year alone, we've only done one baptism. We had 11 people already get baptized, with 2 spontaneous in the moment in the day. On June 2nd, we're going to do another one. And if any indication from the sign-up list so far, we're going to see at least another 11. It's going to be crazy. So just be prepared for that. Show up on the 2nd, cheer on people. But that's amazing. Baptisms, 11 people. Out of 329 average adults, we had 11 get baptized. That's pretty incredible. For the Rooted folks, that's an initiative we started last year just to sort of pilot it out, but then we fully pressed into it in January this year. We had 31 people go through and complete Rooted. That doesn't include the facilitators. That doesn't include the people like Charmaine and myself who are behind the scenes sort of helping along with that process. We have another session starting in the fall to do the same thing, and we're expecting it to, I'm almost afraid if it doubles because it's a lot of people who are just like pouring into and getting rooted in their faith. And so that was incredible to see 31 people go through that. If you guys could have been a fly on the wall during the celebration, which is the last week of the Rooted process, it's week 11, they are all in here eating dinner and just sharing stories about what God has done in their lives. That was 31 people who had specific examples of what God had done in their lives in just 10 weeks. Just 10 weeks. Now imagine an entire community of people who can look at their daily life and say, no, God just impacted me in that moment. And they can do that week in and week out, and they can point to that. And they have rhythms in life where they go through and they say, you know what, this is a prayer week for me. I just got to get intense and on my knees. Or I got to fast this week. So Rooted is an incredible experience. If you haven't gone through it, sign up for the fall. We hope that everyone at Branches goes through Rooted eventually. We want to treat it almost like a front door for how to get into discipleship at Branches. We have a lot of paths, a lot of people, a lot of different ways of engaging with God and engaging with each other, but we want to start. We want to start in the same place, and so we're using Rooted for that. The other thing we're looking at is the marriage intensive. We had 4 couples go through and actually complete the marriage intensive right now. This is actually a big deal for us. And so I want to just take a moment. The marriage intensive, Vance and Juanita do an amazing job pouring into our married couples. I know people who've gone through it over the past few years, and they say, like, this completely changed how I communicate in my marriage. We need people to run that. Vance and Juanita shouldn't be the ones who are like spearheading they can't be the only ones who care about marriages at Branches. And I'm not saying anybody in this room needs to step up to that plate, though if you want to, that'd be amazing. But if you know somebody who knows how to communicate, well and wants to learn, I mean, the material is available. You don't even have to use the material. We just need somebody to continue to look after and to care for their married couples, because that is the cornerstone relationship within a family. Children look up to that. The community looks at it. It's like a little health bar that you get to see in a family and in your community. So marriage intensive, super important. Pretty great that we saw 4 couples go through that and complete that. There were, I think, 6 that got halfway, right? So it was pretty good. I mean, I know that there was a lot of good stuff that came out of that. And then right now we've got 147 people enrolled in small groups, which is a lot of people. But we want to see that be everybody. So small groups is one of those things we're actually going to be focusing on next. So John's going to be up here after the break. He's going to talk about the volunteer health plan. That's been a big focus for the leadership team right now. The next thing that we're wanting to focus on as a leadership team is small groups, how to invigorate that, how to make sure that we focus and we take care of both the leaders and the people in the small groups. So while this number 147 is not bad, we think it could be way better. We think that we could do a better job with it, and we acknowledge that we have not done a great job in the last little bit. And so we just want to be upfront about that, be honest, that small groups is not where we want it to be. It's not where we envision it to be. And if you're feeling that same tension, we hear you, we're with you, and we are going to be pressing and working on that. A couple of other things that are coming up is FPU, which is Financial Peace University. It's a Dave Ramsey program. It actually changed my marriage a couple of years ago. I went through that, and it got my wife and I out of debt. I had debt sitting on my student loans since 2002, completely out of debt, completely on that path. It's changed the way that my wife and I communicate about money, and so it's a program that we really believe should be part of just a regular intensive structure at Branches. So we're offering that in the fall. The date will be coming, but we have a professional trained by the Dave Ramsey Institute to run that program. So we also have Starting Point that Timmy mentioned that Sandra's running, and then we'll be looking for more people to run that with you because we just expect it to continue to grow. The last thing I want to talk about, all these numbers, they might seem like sort of flat. They might seem like, oh, it's not quite what I expected. And I just kind of want to remind us that we've been in a season of transition. So I don't know if many of you know, we used to have a lead pastor named Brian Kangas, right? Has anybody heard of that guy before? No, I mean, Brian was at least the face of Branches for many years. And I actually dearly miss him, though I love having Daniel as my boss. So it's not trying to replace you or anything. But Brian isn't here. Brian announced his retirement about, I think, March last year from Stage. And that started the process of us not only looking for candidate for lead pastor, that started the process of us trying to sort of get ready to put Band-Aids on things that would happen. Because the finance team did some research, I'd done some research, things that we had all read and looked at said that we would have a decrease 20% across the board. That we would see 20% decrease in giving, that we would see a 20% decrease in people attending, that we would see a 20% decrease in kids, in youth, in anything. If you could think of a place you could stick a number at the church level, they said you should expect that when your lead pastor, especially one who is so much the face of your organization, leaves, that you would expect a 20% decrease. Now, based upon the numbers I just told you, you probably see that that's not exactly happened. And actually what we have experienced is that it's been either steady or that it's grown. And is actually growing. And so what we're seeing is that it's probably one of the smoothest transitions in the history of church. I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and state that. Like Branches has got this nailed. We've got this figured out. So it's pretty great. And I just want you guys to be encouraged by that we're steady and growing. The last thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and invite all of us to go ahead and stand up. So let's all stand up. And then, unless you have shoulder issues, go ahead and put your arms over your head. And now move to the left. There we go. Move to the right. And now I'm going to send you to a 5-minute break. So we're going to come back up here in 5 minutes.